It's so nice for everyone to join us. And thank you, of course, for taking time out of your day to join us. We're really excited about today's topic. My name is Haley Soprano, and I'm a senior consultant at Tracker. Previously was also on the brand side, though, so I definitely get the hustle and heartache that comes from product seeding. So today, we're really excited to dive into product seeding because we know that product seeding campaigns are great for driving awareness and sales for brands. They also can have a dark side. There's a lot of effort, money, time that goes into product seeding, and we also know that sometimes it can have its negative impacts when it comes to not realizing how much time might be wasted if you're not correctly measuring your ROI, as well as the negative impact on the environment it can have by sending wasteful product. So today we're going to discuss some solutions for marketers' biggest challenges that we've heard, especially when it comes to product seeding campaigns, so that you guys can leave this feeling really empowered, understand how you can improve your response rates, understand how to find the right people, and really address some of those big challenges that we're hearing from all marketers. And we're going to be discussing these challenges and solutions with none other than influencer and entertainment marketing consultant, Bette Ann Fialkov, who I will let introduce herself shortly. First of all, if you don't already know, Tracker is an all-in-one influencer marketing platform that helps brands build performance-driven programs at scale. So we help marketers do everything from finding influencers, managing campaigns, measuring the success of their programs, and we help them with also looking at competitive benchmarks as well. So we work with a variety of brands from L'Oreal to Diageo, Beekman 1802, Pandora, and many, many others. So if you aren't aware, definitely feel free to reach out. You can also click the Get a Demo button at any point. That's at the top of your screen, and no worries, no strings attached. The main reason we're happy to have you here today is more so you can leave again feeling empowered with lots of knowledge about product seeding. And Bette Ann, without further ado, I'd love to kick it over to you to give yourself an introduction.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me, Haley. I'm so excited to be here. So just as some quick background on who I am, I have worked on the brand side for a lot of big brands, always in influencer marketing, celebrity partnerships, and strategic brand partnerships. I was at Google for a really long time, launching Google Plus, and then working on hardware, launching Pixel 1 and Pixel 2. I jumped over to Lyft, where I was the director of influencer marketing and entertainment experiences. And then most recently, I was at Hims & Hers, where I was the head of entertainment and culture. Currently, I am diving into my consultancy, which I've had for about 2.5 years. And I am working with tons of brands in various verticals, from fintech to fine jewelry, to really help them build out their influencer marketing strategy as well as execute.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bette Ann. All right, so I'm excited to dive into things. If you are here today joining us, you probably are already somewhat aware of how impactful product seeding can be for your brand, and you're not alone. We actually found from a recent survey we did that 92% of marketers at least somewhat agree that influencer product seeding has successfully driven awareness for their brands. However, while we know it can be very successful, we also know that it comes with its own set of challenges. So from the same survey, we heard some of the biggest challenges that brands are facing. And while we wish we could get through all of these challenges today and some really great solutions for them, we're going to focus on a few key ones. The first one being how to find the right influencer. So making sure, again, when it comes to time and effort, you want to make sure that you're sending to the right people, and really, again, focusing on quality over quantity, which Bette Ann will get into. We'll also be covering writing the right outreach messages, receiving responses to make sure, again, that you're giving your response rate the best chances possible. We'll also be talking about managing inbound gifting requests from influencers. So not only you reaching out outbound, but also when you get those requests from people, what do you do with those? How do you go about managing them? And then the last two key challenges we're going to address are going to be encouraging influencer posting and then tracking posting rate and measuring ROI. So without further ado, let's jump into the first challenge here, which Bette Ann has some really great tips on for everybody. And I know this is probably one of the biggest challenges, especially when it comes to a time and efficiency standpoint. So when it comes to identifying the right people to potentially send your product to, what are some tips, or how can a brand select the right influencers to target?
I love this question. So first, you really need to take a step back and identify what your goals are with product seeding. So typically for the brands that I've worked for, we have seeded in order to build UGC style social buzz, to build relationships, to remain top of mind, and to unlock opportunities. Seeding must check one of these boxes to move forward. So, for example, maybe you are seeding to somebody and you know they are not going to post. Well, there should be a strategic reason you're seeding to them. So, maybe you want to do a bigger partnership with them in the future, or maybe they're the gatekeeper to a celebrity you're trying to work with. You must have one of these strategic reasons checked before you move forward. Of course, if your goal is to create UGC style social buzz, then you want to make sure the influencers that you are seeding to actually speak to your target audience. The second thing that you should keep in mind as you're seeding is the context. So, the best seeding happens when the influencer needs your product at that moment in time. An example of that is this past holiday season at Hims and Hers, we sent influencers our probiotics for Christmas. We did this because obviously during the holiday times, you're eating, you're drinking, you're really feeling that sort of like holiday bloat. And so we met the influencers where they needed the product most. And then lastly, it's about quantity, not quality. So it's not about sending out, 300 to 500 items for, one campaign. It's really about targeting who you're sending these seeding products or unboxing experiences to. Typically, I like to send anywhere from like 15 to 50, not 500. I think that, when you are more focused and targeted, you can really get to the influencers that make the most sense for your brand versus just, sending packages out that are going to land on, a manager, an agent's desk and may not even get to, who you're targeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that idea of focusing on quality over quantity is really important. And especially when maybe you have a limited team or a limited product you're able to send out to influencers, you want to make sure you're really getting the best of the best. So let's say you found the right influencers and you're ready to reach out. What is your best advice for actually reaching out to those influencers? What should your communication look like? How do you go about that?
Yeah. So, this is a no brainer, but of course, reach out to the people that you already have relationships with. This is going to increase your chance of not only them receiving the product, but then actually posting. Of course, if you don't have relationships, then you can use a tool like Tracker Creator Hub, where influencers can actually opt in. I love what Tracker has built to help you do this. You can also look at who's already using your products and tagging you on social. Engaging with creators, across social platforms is helpful as well. So commenting on their posts and things like that. Sending DMs is a little bit tricky because just given the restrictions across the various platforms of brands reaching out to creators, you may not actually be able to. And then reaching out to managers or talent agents and seeing if any of their influencers would be interested in your product is something that I've seen a lot of success in. I'm actually part of a network called Women in Influencer Marketing, and oftentimes managers are asking the community for specific product needs for one or more of their influencers. So I think that's a good strategy. And then, of course, if you are able to find the email address, personally, I use Tracker a lot of times to find this type of info. So if you're cold reaching, outreaching to an influencer by email, it's so important that your first message is really personable and that you're showing the influencer that you're actually paying attention to their content and you're not just copying and pasting, from influencer to influencer. Like really spend time getting to know the influencer's content.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it just something as easy, I feel like, as a comment or liking constantly or replying to a story is such a good way. I feel like as a brand to really show like, hey, I'm not just cold outreaching you, but I really actually am engaging with your content. And even I think sometimes too, like maybe mentioning something that you recently saw in their content, maybe they just got married, or maybe they just did a really cool brand partnership for another brand, even could be something really interesting to add in to just let them know, like, you are paying attention, you are really engaged, and understand like who they are and what their content is about. So I think that's a really good point. So we talked about finding the right influencers, outreaching influencers, but the other portion here is a lot of times when brands are growing, you might go through this phase where you're constantly the person outreaching, trying to get people to want to accept your product and send product to them. But then I think there is almost that like tipping point where all these influencers start seeing other influencers getting sent product from a brand, and they kind of become interested, and then they might start reaching out to you via DM or maybe email and are interested in joining like a PR list or getting on your seeding list. What is your recommendation for managing those inbound requests?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the goal to have influencers reaching out to you and seeing other influencers posting and creating that FOMO. That's the ultimate goal. But I think you really need to weigh the time and effort on these inbound requests. So again, like I've always been on the brand side, so I am the front lines of receiving these requests, and there can be a lot of requests. And for me, the requests that I respond to are if the creator or the manager, whoever's reaching out, has really put some thought into why my product is good for the creator, why it makes sense, and how it's going to show up in the creator's content. I always pay attention where there's some thought and some strategy put behind it. Or if the creator is like a brand loyalist or somebody you could see yourself working with in the future. So those are typically the situations where I'm responding to these inbound requests. But again, it's not free to send out product. Like it's still hitting your bottom line. So you have to weigh, like, is the time and effort worth what you're going to get in return from this influencer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you briefly mentioned Tracker's Creator Hub, and we actually have some screenshots of Creator Hub on this next slide. But for anyone who doesn't know, if you are getting to that point where you're managing a lot of requests and it kind of becomes a little unbearable, or you don't have enough bandwidth, Tracker's Creator Hub is a great way to manage and stay organized with your seeding program, since we all probably know how out of hand and a little crazy they can get. And sometimes you reach that point, you're ready to graduate out of your spreadsheets, hopefully. So that's another really great point that you made. And just to touch on that, which again, you see some screenshots here, Tracker's Creator Hub can help you have a centralized location to create briefs, view content, allow influencers, like invite them to opt into certain campaigns that you might have, as well as you can integrate with Shopify. So instead of you spending all that time, especially with inbound and outbound requests, asking like, hey, which products are you interested in, making sure that they have a very tailored, personalized experience, you can also set up the Shopify integration where that influencer can just go right to a storefront and select the products that they're most interested in trying. So definitely a great point you brought up there, and just to shed a little more light on what that is. So back to our key challenges. We've talked about how to solve for finding the right influencers, managing the communication, managing inbound requests. But let's say you've sent your your qualified list of influencers product. Now, how do you encourage people to post? Is there any certain verbiage you include in that communication? How do you ultimately maximize your response rate?
Yeah, so I think even before the packages go out, really thinking about personalization. So, and thinking about making, whatever it is that you're sending into like a unique experience for the creator, like when they're opening it. So how do you create an excitement and engagement from your product seeding? Thinking through how you design the packages. Are there any additional products that maybe you're not making, but they, go with whatever you're sending out? The personalized note that you include, what is that going to say? All of this contributes, to if somebody is going to be posting about your brand. But in terms of process, basically, I create touch points after I have already once I send the product, the package out. So first, I reach out to the influencer and let them know the tracking. Then once the product has actually arrived, I check in with them and let them know that the product has arrived, that they've received it. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, in the package, I also include this highly personalized note, like typically a handwritten note, and it calls out, any tags, hashtags, things like that that the influencer should be posting, so that they're not having to go and flip over to Instagram and see, what the actual like tags are and things like that. So just making it simple for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that personalized aspect really goes a long way, even if it's like a printed note that then you go and add like a personalized additional, little touch of a note to, or like making sure you hand sign it. I think that just like speaks volumes to show that you really took time to make sure that person got personalized package, and, that you spent time caring about what they were receiving. So I think that's huge, and something really easy too for people to do. You don't have to have the most insane, amazing unboxing experience that, pops out of some crazy box, but just making sure it's like really personalized, I think, again, can really, really go a long way.
Totally. And just to hop in there, I've
Yeah.
even sent handwritten notes to the warehouses where the products ship from, and have like, the warehouses include those. If there's not, an unboxing experience that's, being
Yeah.
produced, that is an easy way. Just, write 10 notes, send them to the warehouse, and then they can include them in the packaging.
Exactly. Such little things that can really, really go a long way with influencers. And I think that's the other thing too, is really thinking, keeping in mind these influencers aren't just receiving a package from your brand. Chances are the Amazon guy, or not Amazon, maybe the UPS guy is probably their BFF showing up at their doorstep 10 times a day with all these different packages. So really keeping that in mind of like, how do I make my brand and my product stand out to be one of those packages that doesn't just get pushed to the side, but they actually are excited about, I think is huge. All right, so on to one of our last challenges that we're going to address. Again, we've talked about you found the right influencers, you've sent to them, now you're in that phase where you're like very closely watching them, waiting to see who's posting about you. What are your tips, and how do you go about measuring success and evaluating product sending campaigns?
Yeah. So again, this really goes back to what your goals are. So at first, you can, of course, look at the general social metrics like number of posts, potential impressions, actual impressions. And I actually use Tracker for this because influencers, if they opt into Tracker, we can see actual impressions from their stories. And then, of course, engagement, things like that. In some cases, there could be, an affiliate opportunity or a discount code that the influencer promotes, so you could look at conversions. And then I always look at the qualitative metrics too. So, did this unlock opportunities or help build a relationship that you normally wouldn't have? And then lastly, if you're, doing a product seeding in conjunction with a bigger campaign, you can also, down the road, look at brand awareness and brand lift.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many metrics you can look at, and just making sure you have everything organized and in a central location, especially like in Tracker, I think is so helpful, because otherwise at the end of the day, when you're like, all right, I spent all this time, then you have to go back and measure it, and making sure that you have that central location to see the success is super, super important. So lastly, we talked about all the challenges, and there's so many different data points, as you mentioned. Before we jump into some of the examples that you're going to share, is there any other tips, anything else regarding product seeding that you wanted to share to hopefully inspire brands when they're thinking about their own product seeding?
Yeah. So, I think as brands think about their own product seedings, like I'd love to talk through some of these examples to highlight some that I've done over my career. So the first example is from Hims and Hers. So we launched a white paper all about sex about a year ago, and it was called Let's Talk About Sex. And with this, we sent out like truly probably, I think this was the best unboxing experience that I've ever worked on. You can see it's sort of hard to see in this first image, but it was shaped like a bed, like almost like a doll bed. And underneath the bed, you were able to pull little drawers that had sex related products. And then the woman and the man on the bed, you could actually pull that out, and it was a poster that had all of the stats from the Let's Talk About Sex campaign. So this box is so unique. Like, all the influencers that I sent this to, they were like, wow, we have never received a box like this before. And so I think this is a great example of like really creating an experience, like leaning into creativity to make the unboxing experience unique. The second example was from when I was at Google. So you're probably asking yourself, like, this is a jacket and you're about to talk about Google. Like, how does this tie together? So the picture is of an artist designed Alpha Industries jacket. For the launch of Pixel, I built out a partnership with artist Baron Von Fancy. He does a lot of street art in New York and billboards, and a well-known artist there. And so I built out a partnership where we partnered on some phone cases that went with the Pixel phone. And I don't have what the seating kit looked like, but the unboxing experience was also an experience. Influencers were sent this box where there was layers of tissue, and on each layer, a question was asked to the influencers. And finally, they got to the bottom of this box, and they saw this jacket that said, "Curiosity did not kill this cat." Now, this was sent before Pixel actually launched. So it was to really build like that excitement and the curiosity of what was to come. And so I think this was a great example of seeding with something that is not your actual product, but ties to your launch or whatever your product is, and then seeding something before the actual product launch to really create that excitement and awareness prior to the launch. And then lastly, I'm going to talk through an example, another Hims and Hers example from Pride last year. We worked with drag queens Violet Chachki and Gottmik on a really big campaign. And for the seating, we actually let them curate what went into the box. So they picked all of their favorite products, and the design of the box was the artwork from the campaign. And then they actually chose who the box went to. So again, going back to how you pick the influencers that, your products, your box goes to. This time we let our, celebrity partners choose who it went to strategically, because all of these people were their friends. And so because of that, we got tons of posts because the box was coming from Violet and Gottmik versus coming from like Hims and Hers. So I think these are just some fun examples to hopefully inspire you in your seating adventures.
Those are awesome. I love all of these examples because they're all so unique in their own ways. And I can imagine influencers getting these were probably so psyched. One actual follow-up question I had for you that you mentioned when you were talking about the Google example here is that you sent this product ahead of when the product was actually launching. And so it wasn't necessarily the product, but something to get people excited and curious. And that just brings me to an overall question we didn't really have, but in kind of just looking big picture, what would you say as far as any kind of like estimations in terms of timelines people should consider baking in for product seeding campaigns, from like building their list to sending the product to seeing, actual activity from the influencers?
Yeah. So, the building the list and sending the product can actually be fairly quick. Like I just executed a Mother's Day seeding campaign for a fine jewelry company called K. Kane. And we sent like beautiful necklaces to 15 influencers. And the lead up, was only about 2 weeks. It was a very quick, lead up time. But what actually took a long time is, once the influencers get the product, some of them are out of town, and now we're looking 2 weeks after Mother's Day, and we just had some posts go live this week. So, I think in building out your seating strategy, I think that, it's great to give yourself, if you're not producing products, like obviously this jacket here or the box that Hims and Hers, Let's Talk About Sex box, those take about, like 6 to 8 weeks to produce something custom. But if you're just sending out product, it can be fairly quick. But you just have to remember, because you're not contracting these influencers, and it's really about your relationships, and hopefully they're going to post. They're not obligated to post, and they're not obligated to post on your timeline. You can ask them, but it could take multiple weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I want to kind of wrap on that, because I think with all these campaigns and, all the effort that goes into seeding campaigns, it's really important to think of some of those like upfront, maybe like obstacles when it comes to time. Like I know in my past working on seeding campaigns, you might have like 3 different prototypes for a box. I'm sure like the Hims and Hers example before you got to the right one. And then keeping in mind, it's going to take time to create this like experience and this product and packaging and box for them. So I think that's another really good key call out, is keep in mind your kind of timing in terms of when does it make sense for you, for your influencers to hopefully post about it. Mother's Day is a great example, something that's very timely and is around a certain holiday. You want to make sure that you're building out a calendar, more of like a work back calendar leading up to that day. And of course, taking into consideration different things that can happen. Maybe your boxes get stuck on a shipping freight boat somewhere. So that's another really key thing I think to keep in mind. And then as Bette Ann also mentioned, with product seeding campaigns, you of course aren't paying for the content. You're paying for the product and mailing and everything in hopes that they'll post. So again, just keeping that in mind, especially summer months, a lot of influencers go on vacation just like everybody else. So you might not get that immediate quick gratification of, it got to their door and they opened it that same day. So just keeping that in mind, I think, is also really helpful. And also to just make one other quick note on the cost of product seeding and the fact it's not a contract for content. The one other great thing about if you're tracking your product seeding campaigns in Tracker is that even if you don't have a cost associated with the content, like you wouldn't hear in a product seeding instance, you could still organize all your influencers in a campaign. And then let's say this Hims and Hers box, let's say it costs you $100 to put together to send to your influencers. You could actually put that in as the product cost. And then if any of those influencers did end up posting, you would have all of their performance metrics related to the specific seeding campaign if you set up the campaign. And then as Bette Ann mentioned, you can track all of that right there in Tracker, and you could actually get a CPV, your cost per video view, cost per engagement from those influencers just based on product seeding. And that can really, again, help inform you who are these influencers who are going to be most efficient for me to send products to in the future, as well as understanding who your top performers are from product seeding can also help you better identify influencers that could help fuel future paid programs. So all things to take into consideration, but these are amazing examples, and I think they really tie everything up really nicely that we talked about. So we're done with our talk about challenges and solutions when it comes to product seeding. So with the time that we have left, we want to open it up to questions, and let's see what everyone is curious about today. So the first one, how many times would you recommend using the same influencer if their goal is brand awareness? And do you have a suggestion for a smart way to work with them on this goal?
Yeah, so I am a big believer in repeat influencers. So I think it shows influencers' audiences when their audiences are seeing them post about you multiple times, it shows that authenticity and that they're truly, like a fan of the brand. So, I think similar to how I love building ambassador programs and think they really work well, I think with seeding, I think sending product and using the same influencer a few times, I think is great. Like I think you should do that. Second part of the question, a smart way to work with them on this goal? Working with the influencer on the goal? Is that, Haley, what do you think?
I would say maybe it's the brand building brand awareness. I'm not actually sure. If you ask this question, feel free to drop a follow-up down below. Whether it's influencer or brand, I think maybe when you're just thinking of brand awareness, I think in this specific instance of product seeding, since you're not giving like a specific brief to the influencer of what you want to have them do or say with the product, it might be slightly out of your hands. But from my point of view, I would say just the overall mention of getting your brand out there, having an influencer talk about it and show it is brand awareness in itself.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have
definitely.
anything to add on. All right, next question. Do we have industry benchmarks on how many creators we should seed per campaign? So I don't know if you have any specific benchmarks, Bette Ann, or any kind of like estimates ranges you would want to share. We do have some different data points that we got from a survey that Tracker did. So we can make sure that that is also shared in conjunction with this presentation after. But do you have any other kind of recommendations in terms of how many creators? And I would even say too, just to add on it, probably a lot has to do with your resources, bandwidth,
Right.
budget, and less so about actual brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in my experience, I like to keep it more lean, which I talked about before. So I would say like 15 to 50 influencers per campaign is what I have seen a lot of success with. But then again, when I was at Google, we, were seeding a lot of the Google hardware out to a lot of influencers. But, I would say the more that you're seeding out, it just becomes less likely that all of those influencers are going to be posting about
I would agree. Yeah. And it definitely depends whether you're trying to seed a product that is a $500 product versus a, $15 bottle of SPF. So other things to keep in mind as well. All right. Our next question. Do you think product seeding is more valuable than contracted influencer campaigns?
I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both. I think, seeding is a tactic that you should use in your influencer marketing strategy. You need both of them, So I think you're going to get from a contracted influencer campaign, you are going to be able to do more with that content because you're going to be able to control the content a little bit more. And you're also potentially going to be able to use that content, across your organic social, paid social, things like that, versus with a product seeding. Sure, maybe you could reshare a story, but also you don't know what you're going to get with a product seeding. It's kind of rolling the dice and hoping for the best. And so I just don't think you should look at them as like one or the other, but they should be complementary.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think there's also something to be said for having both of those elements as part of your strategy, because you also don't want to be overly reliant on just paid partners, because that, of course, can be extremely expensive. So having that good balance, and like you mentioned, having them be complementary to each other, I think is super important. That way you have, your group of influencers that is slightly more cost effective. Maybe they're not reaching as large of an audience, but they're highly engaged with their audience and their audience really trusts them. They're very close knit. Well, your paid partners, you can probably lean on for scaling reach a bit more, and they're going to be the ones really kind of driving that bigger volume. So I think definitely some great ways to be looking at that, but both are super valuable. And Bette Ann, what brands do you work with now? And are you currently taking on new clients? It looks like someone is looking for a Bette Ann.
I love this question. So I'm working with a lot of really interesting brands. I mentioned a jewelry company, Kay Kane. I just finished a great project with Eventbrite and working on something with Chase and a really amazing startup called Pager and a couple of others that I'm working on. And yes, I am taking on new clients. So if anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I am, very accessible there.
And we'll share all of Bette Ann's contact information at the end. So it will be in the presentation that gets shared out. Also, feel free to screenshot it if you would like, but lots of great ways to connect with her. And she is an amazing resource and guru when it comes to product seeding. So anyone who does work with her would be extremely lucky. All right. And what do you think the future is for influencer seeding? Do you think influencers are much more eco-conscious now? Charlie mentions that they've noticed some prefer to just get the product rather than receiving a super creative, engaging gift box. How should brands navigate this and being more eco-friendly, perhaps?
This is a great question. And actually, at Hims and Hers, we really thought about this. We worked with a manufacturer for our boxes so that it was, some of it was, fully like recyclable. And sometimes we would include, instead of, like a regular paper, we would include seed paper so people could plant it. And so we were always thinking about ways that, because yes, like you look at the examples that I showed you, there's a lot of packaging. So we're always thinking about ways that it could be like reused or recycled, upcycled, and things like that. But yeah, I think it's something that brands should keep in mind as they're building out these, if they are going to be doing an unboxing experience.
Definitely. I think another thing that plays into this idea of being more tailored, personalized experience with influencers and making sure you're not sending them product that's going to be wasteful to them. I mean, influencers can only have so many, SPFs or a foundation, for example. So if you are a tracker user, or if you're interested in having a more streamlined process for especially figuring out what products an influencer wants to ensure like it's going to be something they're going to get, they're going to enjoy, love. Maybe it even is like it matches the right skin tone, for example. Using the Shopify integration with Tracker is a super, super good way to also streamline, be more efficient, as well as be eco-friendly, because you're not just sending product and hoping like, oh, I hope they don't have too many of this primer already. You can really tailor the products you're sending to what they actually want because you're letting them choose. And then as Bette Ann mentioned, I think there's so many great alternatives now from different packaging and whether that's using glass or things that they can reuse, recycle. I think there's so many amazing options these days. So definitely being cognizant of that is a great way, again, to stand out to influencers. Okay, is there a way to push the influencer in feed posting from seedings and not just stories? This is a good question.
Yeah, this is a good question. So, I mentioned the jewelry company that I did the Mother's Day gifting for, and I only gifted to 15 influencers, but we ended up getting 4 in-feed posts, which was super exciting. But I didn't influence that. I think it was by nature of like what the product was. So it was a super customized necklace. And so I think because of that, because it was personalized, because it was customized, it made sense to like fit in their in feed posts. I think, when you're sending the note to the influencer, you could always like say something or encourage them in the note. But I think it depends on what the product is, if it's going to make sense like in feed for them.
Definitely. It's hard at the end of the day, just keeping in mind it's not contracted. So it's a little bit of cross your fingers and, hope that your package and product that you sent them is something that they're really going to want to share.
Yeah.
I do see one other question from Allie. I think this is a great question. Do you tell these influencers that you are seeding them product, or do you just send it without warning? And I think this goes back to our conversation about communication and how that really plays a key role.
Yeah. So I think you could do this in both cases. So if you already have an ambassador program or you've been working with these influencers over and over again, and you want to send them like a surprise for the holidays and things like that, I think you can, alert them that, something is coming their way, or you could just like, once it arrives, be like, hey, like, this has arrived. Just because if you already have this relationship with them, if you're sending like to new influencers that you haven't had an ongoing relationship, yes, like always give them the heads up. Because the other thing is you don't know that they're going to be home. They could be traveling. They could be, moving. You have no idea. So you always should give the heads up with net new influencer seeding campaigns. With ambassadors, you could have like a little bit more flexibility because they're already like in your fold and you've already worked with them on things previously.
Absolutely. And I think we have time for one more question, which I think this is a great one to end it on, because talking about how do you measure your success. So could you just talk a little bit more, Bette Ann, about pulling reporting and making sure you don't miss an influencer organically posting after you've gifted to them?
Yeah. So, I use Tracker, and I try to make sure that if possible, if the influencers are able to opt in, that makes it a lot easier, because then Tracker is pulling all of the content, their stories, and you're able to set filters. And so you're able to, not miss anything. For those influencers that are not opted in, I typically I work with a team to help monitor that content. And I'm constantly on my phone looking and seeing if they post. It's not necessarily scalable. If you're working with 500 influencers, that's not scalable. But if you're working with up to 100 influencers, I make sure that I am following them on Instagram, and screenshotting if they've posted, or videoing my screen if they post, and then I can upload that to Tracker and count it in the final reporting.
Absolutely. Yes, lots of great ways, and definitely having everything centralized, especially in Tracker, can be a great way to track that. So thank you everyone for all your questions. Bette Ann, if anyone wants to reach you after, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great, or you could follow me on Instagram and reach out to me there. Either one is perfect.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today, taking the time out of your day. We really appreciate it and value it. If you also haven't had a chance to take a look at our product seeding report, I highly recommend that. There's some really great data points in there to share. So definitely recommend taking a look at that. And then if you're also curious about any of the different capabilities or features of Tracker that we did touch on today, you can always schedule a demo. Again, if you go to the top of your screen, you'll see schedule a demo, and you can schedule a demo and really understand some of the different capabilities that can help you streamlining your programs, improving your measurement. But again, thank you so much, and be sure to check out all these resources that we have for you. Also, that product seeding report is in the media section of our website if you want to go and find it. But we're so glad that you guys came, and again, feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and thank you again, Bette Ann, so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.